So when we talk about that type of end cap in a liquor store, it's a very different selling channel, exposed to different regulations and different holders of power, let's say, from a distribution standpoint. These are heavy products that have to run on trucks many times. Other times they're being distributed direct to consumer. What does someone need to understand about operating in this new retail environment? And by that, I mean the liquor stores, which is where a lot of these products are being sold, and direct to consumer.
There's the operational part, but there's also the legal part. And I mentioned that each state has its own law. First of all, there are some states that don't have laws on any of this. Some are implicitly permitted, but unclear as to where, when, and who, and that sort of thing. There are different laws on different cannabinoids in different states. There are different laws on THC limits, like Minnesota is beverages is 5 milligrams, right? Virginia is 2 milligrams per package. There are different laws on whether these products need to be sold in or out of the state legal market, even if those laws aren't clear. Some of them are just regulatory interpretations. There are different laws on the extent of regulation over the supply chain. So more and more now, states are saying, if you're going to sell any of these hemp products, you not only need the certificate of analysis on the product, you need it on the original harvest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agricultural product.
Right, exactly. And like very few people are paying attention to that. And then each state has its own tax scheme on it, in addition to the, where and when and how and all that sort of thing. So even before you get to the operational part, it's really challenging on the state part, and it's going to continue to change. And that's one of the things. You can't even say, okay, it's this, and go to market uniformly across the United States because it's so dynamic.
But it's so much easier than cannabis regulated.
The policy that will be created through disruption, and the way you get this disruption done is by commercializing the product, and the best way to do that is to put it in front of 100 million people, a real total addressable market. And from those users, like my mom, who's 60 some odd years old, she's out there on the golf course with the ladies, now mixing a high and dry instead of getting smashed on Arnold Palmer's.
We joke around about alcohol, but it's a very toxic substance that's been like killing humanity for a very long time. If you calculate the wars that we've had in the last 4 years, the deaths from wars in the last 4 years across the globe is significantly less. It's like something like 10 million deaths related to alcohol. It's a toxic substance. We all know it intuitively that it's hurting us, yet we still participate in it. This is what the plant has been here for, is to solve these kind of problems. There's massive opportunity, and it's such a low barrier to entry. Like Eric's saying, yes, there's all this unique state-by-state compliance, but there's a federal law that says this is legal. Like the regulated cannabis space has operated with the absolute inverse. There's been state laws that allow what we do, but the federal has always been against it. It's been flipped. The U.S. government is on our side. Like the individual state might have some nuances, but that it especially applies for things like beverage distribution on a state-by-state basis. But when you're playing the DVC game, it's a whole nother game.
The nature of how hemp was legalized and the questions that were out there kind of drove necessity to kind of have a single voice. The Hemp Beverage Alliance, run by Christopher Lackner, one of the most active organizations I've ever seen in the cannabis industry. You have every other week a Zoom call with over 100 folks participating actively, sharing information, sharing intel, gathering energy and momentum to go lobby, to build relevance, really what it is. It's like there's a large contingent of licensed operators that have been fighting the hard fight. There's a lot of like sunk cost in the strategy that they've been working on. And so naturally, they perceive this as a threat. And there's a lot of other considerations with this. The licensed cannabis industry has worked really hard for social equity and creating opportunity for those impacted by the war on drugs. Like, there's a good reason why this conversation exists. At the end of the day, as Aaron was saying, we're talking about federally legal opportunity that is creating access to the plant.
You can sit and say we don't want any more regulation, but there's going to be some level of additional regulation and the opportunity to steer it and make it more aligned with the actual plant and products and how folks are using them. State legal cannabis markets were not designed on that. They as a whole were not designed with understanding of the science or understanding of the economics of the illicit market. And so it is an opportunity to have some level of regulation. And the reason that this, that reputation has arisen, even though it wholly doesn't apply to, for example, the people sitting at this table and their companies, but it applies to some. And so some level of regulation is a good thing for consumers because it gives them the confidence.
There was some mention about the FDA. There's also the TTB. Eric, can you maybe explain a little bit about the difference between these two? And is there debate right now about where ultimately, if we get what we think we want, which is eventual federal legality, where is it going to fall? Do we have any sense of what that looks like?
No, really. I mean, I have a sense, but I don't think that the federal government has a sense. And the bills, Booker, Schumer, Wyden bill, was originally drafted to put more of cannabinoid regulation within the TTB. And the TTB, just so everyone knows, is the bureau that taxes tobacco and regulates tobacco.
And alcohol.
And alcohol, right. So they have the experience with these sort of things, regulating them just to go to market. The FDA is an additional layer on top. The FDA's position is THC or CBD in any drink is illegal. If it's already in the drug pipeline, you can't then put it in other foods. They also say it's illegal because even though there have been some self-certification, there hasn't been sufficient certification of grass. To be clear, you have TTB, which is sitting there ready to regulate hemp and cannabis, but may or may not get the opportunity. FDA, which already does and already has been sending enforcement letters, but has not taken any additional steps.
To be clear, that's when people say things like this will cure cancer or something like that.
And to be clear, they also, the reason that I equivocated is because they had an opportunity to regulate this and basically handed it back to Congress and said, we haven't figured out a way to do that. And that was mostly about CBD. Because then you have the FTC, which is saying, well, are these safe products? Are they representing correctly? And I fear everyone wants their hands on it, right? And there needs to be sensible regulation so that we're not back in the space that everyone is admitting is not ideal.
Everyone's like looking up, like, well, can someone tell me what to do? And it's like, we are the people. This is us. We're the ones who should make these decisions, and we should tell them because we're the ones who advocate and understand and talk to the consumers on a regular basis. But that's, I think it's like trauma from the regulated cannabis space. I think it's been really challenging for a really long time, and it's caused everyone to like not want to get swatted or whatever. It's a reframe, and I know I'm naive on a lot of this. We have to come collectively to the table and kind of start directing policy where we want it to go rather than wait for someone to tell us where we should sit.
What would nirvana look like if hemp and cannabis were able to effectively self-regulate and not wait around for the federal government to figure all this out?
The TTB. He doesn't agree with me, but
I think the TTP is great, but the problem is that it handicaps D2C at scale. That I think we probably could all agree on is low dose versus high dose. I think is probably an important separation. There's an opportunity to like clarify that low dose THC products are like this and they do things like this, and that's a lot different than smoking a fat blunt. I think that there should be a lot less regulation for the low dose. If we're going to go with the TTB for regulation on beverages and whatnot, then I think part of it should be evolving the laws on things like direct-to-consumer. And for those who aren't aware, like the direct-to-consumer alcohol business is pretty much non-existent because it's you have to participate in the 3-tier distribution system. You have to have ID checks on the front end, ID checks on the back end. It's very complicated.
yeah, so like the TTB question is, could there be new policy if they decide to engage? I think they're probably going to be the ones, and Nirvana would be a federally legal product with active state markets for higher dose products like gummies and flour and combustibles. And then I think everybody at this table would be just fine with this carve out provision for, naturally extracted, Delta 9 THC in a low dose format with all the necessary ingredients to be successful at scale in retail.
Hey, Ian, I'd like to go back to Nirvana for a second.
Please.
Same thing. My version of Nirvana is safe, legal, affordable access to cannabis. And so that would mean getting rid of any division between hemp, so-called hemp, and so-called marijuana. I mean, the notion that we have this regulatory division based on 0.3% Delta 9 THC by dry weight, which is hard enough to understand in and of itself. And what does access mean? I mean, in my nirvana, it probably means a vending machine over there filled with fresh, good cannabis and different types of products. It means that wherever I am, I can call up or get on my phone and get exactly what I want. There aren't all the regulatory hurdles, although there's age gating, right? There's going to need to be that. But there is the access to get that and to get the best and most innovative products.